Hey everybody, it's Jim here, and today I'm excited to share with you a conversation that I had with the co-owner and the head engineer of Capricorn Studios in San Diego, California, Mr. Kris Towne. And we talk about everything from tone, how to prepare to go into a studio, certain things that you can try, certain things you might not think of that will really enhance your songs. We had a lot of fun. We had a lot of diversity of thought as far as ways to approach recording. Now, we did this through FaceTime. The audio is going to be great because we both separated the way the audio that was being recorded through mics into our own interfaces. However, the video did sputter a little bit because it's FaceTime, guys. If you ever used it before, you know it ain't perfect. But with that being said, I hope you enjoy this conversation I had with Mr. Kris Towne. Hey everybody, it's Jim, and today I have somebody that's not Dave Nelson that runs the studio, my favorite recording studio in America, believe it or not, Capricorn Studios. His name is Mr. Kris Towne. How are you doing tonight, Kris?
Doing great, Jim. How you doing, buddy?
I'm hanging in there, man. I kind of really miss that studio, and when I see you
Aren't we all?
behind you, I'm like, oh man, like, there's nothing like that out here. I've been to a few, and it's a different experience for sure.
Yeah. Well, it's when you find a place that you like, you can make it your home. It's a home away from home. So
Yeah, and eventually I'll be back there at some point. Once things somewhat calm down, with flying and everything, it's kind of hectic, but that's not really the point of any of this. We don't really want to go there. How is it down there, by the
yeah.
way? Is it still kind of just like super crazy on E Street?
It's a little bit of the Wild West kind of feeling. But I think things are fine. All the shops are open. People are out and about having fun. It's like life's somewhat back to normal, and it's good to see people just living. And but yeah, it's still downtown. So
Yeah.
you know.
No, that's good to hear though, because when that place was at its best, there was nothing like it. It's like the perfect kind of in between from like a big city to like kind of like a one street Broadway kind of thing. But I don't know if for people that don't know anything about you, could you just like give me a little bit of history about like yourself and how long you've been running Capricorn?
Sure. So I'm from Minnesota originally. Grew up. Moved to San Francisco when I was 18. Then moved down to San Diego here, and I've been here ever since. I've been at this studio Capricorn for about 8.5 years now. Really been running it, operating it as co-owner and head engineer, main producer for probably about 5 years.
Nice, nice. Yeah, I remember the first time I went in there was 2015. I actually think it was January 20th because you're really good at labeling folders, and I've had that folder for quite
Yeah,
some time.
it's important. Yeah,
File management is very, very
yeah.
overlooked, and I know one thing that you always say when you're bringing in sessions, make sure you have it in the right format and well organized because it makes things go easier. And that kind of leads me to one thing I wanted to ask you about. For somebody that's not used to going into a recording studio,
Sure.
what advice would you give them as far as like the total preparation, not as far as like learning their own songs and stuff? We're going to just assume that they know how to play what they want to play when they get in there, as far as just getting ready, the sessions and stuff like that, and how to make the best use of your time when you're in a studio.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you hit the nail on the head, but definitely practicing, knowing your songs, that kind of stuff is just a given. Because surprisingly, a lot of people still work on that and aren't quite sure. And unless you have a huge budget or just time to kill, you need to know what you want, how to play it, all the parts of the songs and stuff like that. So, but as far as the technical side of things, I guess tone is really important because like you're a tone guy, right? You have like you bring certain guitars for certain songs. You know what amps I had here, what to use. Maybe you bring something, but like you want a Fender Jag for this song because it just has a kind of a sound to it. So a lot of people maybe just think about with your guitars, with your drums, are you going for like big open like Zeppelin drums, or do you want like tight padded kind of like Beatles drums or something? Like there's just tones, things like that, so that you bring all the gear you can and prep your instruments and stuff like that. But also from my end or from the studio's end, we know where to start with, like what kind of mics to pick if we're using our gear, which amplifier to choose, Things like that is pretty big. I feel like a lot of people on the startup or kind of medium level recording artists and stuff don't really think too much about tones, and that's one of the biggest. If your tone sounds great and what you want before it even hits a computer or a DAW or anything like that, you're already way ahead of just making a great record, because it's going to sound how you want it to without any plugins, without any extra reverbs, things like that. And then you can take it and really hype it up and make things a little bit more crispy and cool. So yeah, tones, and then just and arrangements is pretty big too. I feel like some people are like spend a lot of time just just adding extra guitars or synths or certain things without really having a game plan for it. And sometimes you get too much, and then frequencies are fighting each other, or notes. Like sometimes people are just, you're playing stuff that's like kind of cool, but it's actually fighting with the guitar that you did the day before or something, which was also pretty cool. So just kind of having a game plan for arrangements. Like, is it going to be, you know, guitar, bass, drums? Are you gonna have string sections? Are you doing keyboards? And what are those parts? So as far as arrangement, if you can do any sort of pre-production, always the best. Pre-production is by far, I think, the strongest way people can just be prepared for the studio, so that your tempos, you can play with arrangements and decide what works, what doesn't, harmonies, vocal layers, all that kind of stuff. So pre-production lets you mess around, experiment, and you can do that on a DAW as simple as like GarageBand or something free, Audacity, and just get your songs prepped so that you go into the studio and you're like, okay, we're going to do this, then we're going to do this, then we're going to do this, then we're going to do this, and then maybe we'll try a tambourine, but we're only going to spend 5 minutes doing that. So you always got to try a tambourine, just once. Yeah.
Did you throw the tambourine bit in? Because at the end of one of those sessions, that's exactly what we did once we got everything else done for that day.
Yes. And I almost always do it with something like tambourine, shaker. I love percussion, man. It's just, we got the basket, just the world collection, but just a little bit of like tambourine, shaker. I mean, freaking cowbell, man. Why not? I've done more cowbell in the last year than I probably have in the last 5 years. And it has nothing to do with the Will Ferrell skit. It's just sometimes cowbell's cool, man. But yeah, you hear production, or you hear percussion in so many big productions and stuff like that. It's often subtle, but one of the things I always think about is freaking Rob Zombie and White Zombie tunes, right? It's always kind of heavy and man, but like 90% of their songs, if you listen to them, they have those Christmas bells, those jingle bells in them. Every single song. It's wild. So it's like even Rob Zombie, White Zombie, they're using these cheesy little holiday jingle bells in them, So percussion is huge. I don't know, but yeah, I always feel like at the end it's kind of like the icing on the cake sometimes. But just be like, you know what? Let's do a little shaker. Let's do a little tambourine or something, and just toss it in there, see if it works. If it doesn't, no big deal. We only spent 5 minutes on it.
Yeah, no, I think it makes a big difference. And what's funny is you referenced Rob Zombie, but I think of a lot of, like, that really aggressive, kind of like how Avenged Sevenfold covered a lot of Latin songs, and they
Oh
did
yeah.
so in a way where there was so much Latin percussion behind it, but you had these like super heavy guitars, and I think they just complement each other so well. Kind of like the outro song to Kill Bill, the same way. I can't remember the name of it, but it's just similar in that sense where you don't like notice it because it just fits in so well with the song, but without it you'd be like, this song sounds completely empty, and that's all just in the back end of production and percussion.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I mean, percussion can add a lot of cool like movement and traction to it, like just kind of like groove to it. So I have a couple clients where we're always on a quest, really, to find, each song we try and do something a little bit different, use a different instrument, different percussion thing. So sometimes we push it a little bit and it's like too much. We pull it back and be like, all right, you know what? Egg shaker was fine for this one. We tried the rain stick and the can of beans and the pile of pebbles from the street outside or whatever. We'd like try some creative things, but at the end of the day I was like, you know what? It was cool, we tried it, but just the simple egg shaker was all we needed.
Yeah, I like the skull. the skull that you guys had.
Yeah.
That thing
Ah, you
was
remember that
really
one?
really awesome. Yeah, no, that was
Yeah.
good, man. I actually preferred that over the, I forget what other one you tried to give me, but I was like, oh, the
Oh, we got all
skull
the
was
fruit
this.
ones and stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, I think maybe it was the banana,
Lemons,
but that's
apples,
neither here nor
plums.
there.
Yeah.
But you were talking about tone, and one thing that a lot of people that I talk to now that are kind of like working on stuff and kind of doing everything remotely, nobody seems to mic a cabinet anymore, and I feel like
Hmm.
it's getting to be a lost art. I just kind of wanted to get your opinion. Like, are you familiar with things like the, obviously you know the Kemper stuff, but have you had anybody come in with something from like the Quad Cortex or the Helix or stuff like that, and actually just want to use that straight up in the session and do the rest of the instruments in house? How do you feel about those kind of like things as far as the quality of the tone?
It's hit or miss, but I think it kind of depends on the genre for me. But sometimes it I don't know. It's like you're emulating something or kind of synthetic versions of things, which I mean, again, I usually find the best results when I can marry those with organic versions too. So like a DI or a pedal or something with a guitar, in addition to an amp that's mic'd up, and then find your blend level or something. So, because a lot of that stuff can just be the precision and the clarity and is great. It's fantastic. So, and sometimes you lose a little bit of that on the analog side. But you get like maybe more of the warmth and more of the body and saturation and stuff like that. So I don't know. I think just being open minded is probably to I guess really answer your question. Being open minded is probably the biggest way to just get great results that you think are great, but also your client or the artist is really excited about too and fits with their vision and their like going back to tone, like what they wanted to get out of the record as far as tones and stuff like that. So
I see what you're saying, and I obviously agree with you, and I come in with the plan only because I've been coming in and out of recording studios for so long. But I think one thing that guitar players will do that don't have a lot of experience in like the mixing process and stuff like that, when they dial in a tone, like you're talking about with frequencies, they'll dial it in where there's like almost so much bass into it where just from the get-go, if they come in with a pre-recorded or like a thing from a Kemper or whatever it is, like it could be a neural DSP plugin, they all sound great, but
hmm.
once it sits in with the drums even or just the bass guitar, all of a sudden it's just like really muddy and nobody can figure out why. But I mean, people wonder why the Telecaster is so used so much in the studio, and they're like, that sounds so bright. I mean, yeah, it sounds bright when it's by
Yeah.
itself, but in the context of a band, it's like that's why P90s are cool. Even I think you guys have
Yeah.
one of those guitars has a P90s in it. The blue one.
It's similar. Yeah. It's like that's a Godin, like Canadian
Oh
company.
yeah,
Yeah.
that's what it is. Yeah.
But it's not. It's like their version of a P90. You know what I mean? So it's not the P90, but yeah, similar configuration and tone and stuff like that. So, but yeah, that's one of my favorite guitars.
Yeah, no, that thing sounded really good. It really surprised me when because you would always kind of like sneak us tracks like after we were all done, because for whatever reason we would finish like relatively early,
Yeah.
whether, for whatever reason, there was a multitude, but we would always kind of listen back, and I'd
Yeah.
be really surprised at what instruments you used on certain things. And I thought that was pretty cool. And I think it's just so many people get it in their head that like for a secondary guitar, you know what I mean? Because obviously,
Yeah.
like I'm a Jag guy. I come in, I want to do what I want with the Jag. But then you don't want like three
Yeah.
Jags on the same track. So it's cool to
Yeah.
have something like really, really different, in terms of adding into a mix.
Yeah, no, that's huge, man. I mean, layering guitars, even if you're going to use, like, if you're layering the same parts or similar parts or like harmonies or whatever, or you're just stacking up power chords to get your Smashing Pumpkins kind of approach or whatever. But I mean, changing the pickup on your guitar, huge for that second layer. Or even better, maybe change the guitar. Get a different one. So, you'd always do that. It was cool. Like, be like, okay, well, for this layer, I'm gonna grab the Les Paul or whatever, and so you just fill it out in harmonic content that has different frequency responses and stuff like that. So it's gonna get you a more interesting, I think, and bigger sound by doing that. Same thing. Another tip on that note is like with vocals too. If you want to stack up 10 layers of yourself or something, like do it with different microphones. Don't do it with all just the same mic sitting there, because same kind of principle is like each layer you do, a different microphone is going to have different frequency response and kind of like fill out the sound in a different way, and also avoid maybe harsh peaks and stuff like that, where say a microphone or a guitar amp mic on a guitar has like a really sharp peak around like 4K or something like that. If you double that, triple it, quad it, right, you're just going to keep adding onto that 4K peak, and the end result, you might just have to notch it out so much, or if you don't notice it, you might be like, God damn, those guitars are just, they're cool, but man, they hurt. you know
Yeah, it's really a balancing act at that point. What I found is at one point, I go through a lot of guitars because I buy and sell them, but like I've found more variety through different speaker cabinets and microphones as far as having like a much bigger impact on the overall
hmm
sound recently than pretty much
yeah.
anything else. It's really really interesting how even just like a closed back 112 versus an open back 112 is like night and day.
Yeah. Oh, definitely, man. I mean, I wish, I have about 5 amps at the studio now. I just got a little Fender 112 Deluxe Reverb, I think it is. I just bought it for my buddy like a couple weeks ago. So, but super cool little tube amp. It's got the Fender reverb, everything like that. But, now I have an amp that's not, uh, 140 pounds or whatever too. So I can just take it to a quick little gig or whatever, and it sounds great. But so yeah, we got about 5-6 amps here. But man, I wish we had 50. You know.
Yeah, no, I mean, isn't that the dream? And isn't that kind of the appeal of all of
Yeah.
these devices, like, the Kemper and the Line 6 and the Neural DSP, where
Yeah.
you can get in the ballpark of all these sounds, so to speak. But yeah, I don't know. I'm a big proponent of going in because it's not the same. Like, you can get close, but when you're pushing the air in front of you, I actually feel like it really
Yeah.
like impacts your performance. Like, because that's why you always ask me to come sit in the
Yeah.
room, and I didn't like sitting in the room
Yeah.
because I like the feeling of the loudness, like because you can feel it when it's a cranked tube amp like that, and I love that rocker verb. And I don't know, I feel like that's
Yeah.
something that goes kind of missing with a lot of modern recording. So I mean, outside of that benefit, because to me that's a gigantic benefit, but what other benefits would you say it's make it worth it to go into a recording studio and work with an engineer, as opposed to just kind of dialing everything at home and then doing like MIDI drums or something
hmm
like that?
That is a good question. I think by far the if you can find it, first of all, a studio with a good engineer or producer that understands music and your vision and stuff like that, that's one thing. So not every studio has that, obviously. So, but if you can find a place where you have a person that just gets your vision and knows music and stuff like that and how to get sounds, by far, I think the biggest benefit is just having that producer element, that second opinion, or somebody to say like, that's cool, you know, but like maybe instead of doing the piano or something, we should try the Rhodes or some sort of like Wurlitzer sound, or some sort of like something to take your vision and supplement it with some other ideas, because we can all do great stuff on our own, but like the Beatles had George Martin, and like people, like people need producers to take their great ideas and refine them sometimes, and really just offer some insights and opinions that they wouldn't have come up with other than on their own. So I think just, yeah, having somebody to be like, that's cool, that's really cool, maybe you should do that 4 more times over the chorus or something, instead of just doing it once, like people that like picking out the gems, like when someone's like, or in like pop music and stuff, like finding the hooks and being like, whoa, what did you just do right there? Like that's the hook, forget about whatever you were doing before. Like what you just did there, we should totally punctuate that and focus on that, because that is catchy, or that's great. And so just having somebody else to be able to chime in, offer opinions, and help shape the sound, I think that's going to get you more interesting, creative, cool, and probably professional results too, than just doing it like at your house or in your apartment, by yourself, where you're just running the circle of like, do I think this idea is good? Okay, I think it's good. And then tomorrow you're like, I'm not so sure if it's good. And then the next day you're like, okay, it's good. And, like have somebody to step in and be like, hey, let's do it like this.
Yeah, you saved us, and a really good example of that. The song that me and Dave did, one of the ones, it was kind of like the Frank Zappa, really riffy one. It was called "The Wall." When it came in on the second verse, for whatever reason, when I was doing the second guitar, I had to tune the guitar, so I only strummed it once and I let it breathe. And then you stopped me, and you were like, "Dude, don't play the guitar on that part. Like, leave it wide open," because it was just really big on the toms. And you're like, just leave it wide open. And I wouldn't have thought to do that. But honestly, when I listen back to that song, I'm like, this song wouldn't sound right, because it was just like so like driving and in your face that without that little break, it kind of, I don't know, it's just a little bit too much and too forward at that point. But it's something that, I can't put a value on that, because I wouldn't have thought of that sitting, because I'm too close to it, and I'm just the one working on it. But things like that are what make it worth it to me. And also another thing I've seen, and not just with me, because I could say this from Dave's perspective, and Dave wouldn't mind me saying this. Dave is like really particular about recording, right? Because, and people that don't go into studios all the time, they can have a bit of anxiety about it, a bit of like, oh, this person's judging me, or oh, this person is so used to like this level of like professionalism, they're gonna think I'm gonna suck, this is gonna be a waste of time. So with that kind of attitude, they're already kind of like setting themselves up to fail. But like, I saw Dave like actually go in, and because it was just like, so like, whatever, it's cool, like just do your best, and like, oh, it sounds great, and
Yeah.
it brought out like kind of the best in him. And I think that that's something too that needs to be said, like that calmingness of an environment. Whereas, you're under the pressure cooker, you're by yourself, you can drive yourself crazy.
Yeah, definitely. So on that point, as a producer and engineer, I feel like you can see and kind of like mine out how people work best, right? And not everyone is a tough love kind of artist, right? A lot of us are sensitive, and it's like, I'm not here to tell people that they did a shitty job singing and they can do it better or whatever, for the most part. So so finding ways that you can get the best performances out of people is huge. So if someone like Dave or whoever is like, it's all about encouragement and relaxing, and telling them, hey man, you can do it 5 times, take a break, come back, do it again tomorrow if you want. I don't care, like just do it however you want. Or if you're not feeling it, a song isn't working right or something, let's switch gears and let's do some guitars again, or let's do vocals on a different song or something, instead of just being so driven into one idea or one thing, like, oh well, you said we were gonna do this song today or whatever. Like, who cares? Let's mix it up and find a way to keep the progress going, keep people motivated and stuff like that is huge. So at our studio here anyways, we pride ourselves on trying to make a comfortable, creative, fun space so that people can relax and do the best job they can, and for some of my clients, if people are just really hardcore and they're and they want that, like, I'll give them the tough love too, and it'll be, it's like more on the Phil Spector side of things, and it's like, you really drill into them and push them, because they perform best when they're put up against odds and harsh circumstances, where like being the best they can be, and people telling them like you're no good, you're not doing, like, are you sure you can do this song or something? And then some people, like, they'll rise up, and then they'll give you that performance that you're like, oh damn, okay, that was actually great, that's what we were looking for, so so there's different artists, different approaches, stuff like that, but in general, yeah, I think just making people comfortable is huge. So and rolling with the winds, If you're gonna change gears, change gears.
Okay, yeah, no. So the last thing I wanted to ask you about, because I know your time is valuable. I could sit here all night, but you just wrapped up a session. So,
Yeah.
if you could give somebody, like, we were talking about the importance of the arrangement, and I feel like that gets overlooked, right? Mm-hmm. So what kind of advice would you give to somebody for ways that they can enhance their arrangement, even with just their own guitars, not even thinking about other instruments? What are some little tips and tricks you can give in that sense?
Um, yeah. So experiment, 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 experiment. So if it's a guitar, I would guess a lot of people have like go-to settings on your pickups, um, you know, things like that. So I remember playing in bands, playing in shows, how I my guitar setup, because I played guitar mostly in a lot of the bands I was in and stuff. But um, in our rehearsal room, which was in our house, so we would rehearse 3 4 times a week, whatever. I would have my settings the same all the time, but get to a gig, and it for some reason it's like the guitar is like too bassy, or it's feeling too bright and just like brittle or something, whatever it might be, and it's because of the room, the acoustics are different, all kinds of stuff. So not being afraid to just experiment changing with settings and stuff like that allowed me to get the tone I wanted in a live setting, instead of just kind of rolling with it or being unhappy with it or being frustrated about it or something like that. So I remember watching. I love Hendrix, right? Hendrix is just like, oh my god, growing up, like all the DVDs, stuff like that. I would try and get all my hands on all his stuff. But if you watch him play, regardless of what you think of him being great, the greatest, good, doesn't matter. But if you just watch him play, he's constantly fidgeting. Like the whole song, every single song, he's changing pickups, he's changing tone knobs, he's like touching the amp, he's tweaking stuff, for each little part of the song. He is just continuously in this perennial kind of search of tone. He's like, even though it sounds good, it's like, what, he's still just like that. So I always kind of like hung on to that as far as a inspiration for somebody just like never settling for tone and stuff like that. So anyways, enough rambling, but back to preparation and stuff for studio stuff. Like, yeah, experiment, because you may have something that's your go-to guitar sound, or you plug this into this pedal, into your DAW, and you record and it sounds good. But do a version of the song where you're doing some different pickup configurations and try some different pedals, like stuff like that, because maybe it's just for the chorus or just for the bridge or something that you're like, oh damn, like this other configuration or tone I never would have used before is actually perfect for the bridge. It makes the bridge like pop and come alive now, because I'm doing more of just this like little whatever. So doing something different, you never know if you're gonna like something until you try it. So yeah, experiment with tones, experiment with pedals, configurations, stuff like that, so that again you come in and you're like, okay, this song I'm going to use this guitar for the verses, and I'm going to use this guitar for the choruses. Like, why not? It's the studio. There's no rules. You don't have to do anything like a certain way. So you just got to try it. But yeah, experimenting guitars, stuff like that. Vocally, experiment with your voices, how to sing songs. I always tell people, like, think about characters, right? Are you like 90s grunge rock? Are you like, like 70s metal, or what? Like, are you rap singing? Are you like whatever? But think about characters and kind of like put yourself into that mindset and experiment with your voice. How do you want to sing this song? Is it like kind of light and airy? Is it full chest voice from your diaphragm? Like, so just experimenting with that stuff, so that you get to the studio and you're like, I know exactly what guitars I want to use for what parts. I know exactly what kind of voice I want to sing this song with, what kind of voice I want to sing this song with. Because when you can convey that too to a good engineer and producer, they'll know what microphones to grab from the closet, what preamps to use, like what to do, so that that sound that you're talking about is more easily achievable, like right out the gate.
Gnarly. I think that's all really good advice. I mean,
Yeah.
the tone thing, it gets beat.
Thanks,
It
man.
get be, no, but it's important, because the tone thing does get beaten to death, and it is something we all take really seriously. But when you go into the studio, you have to be open. Like, I tracked through the
Yeah.
jazz chorus on a few songs that I would have never thought that I would have
Hmm.
ever used a jazz chorus on those songs, but it just
Right. It's not a tube amp. So for me, I know, yeah, but for me, I was always like, oh, if it's not a tube amp, forget about it, right? As like, but there's great qualities in a lot of things. So yeah, I mean, there's a time and place where that jazz chorus just sings. It's like, psh, yeah.
I can't thank Kris enough for taking time out of his schedule. He literally just wrapped up a full day's session before he hopped on this FaceTime call with me. So I'm going to leave in the link in the description down below the contact information, the website, some of the stuff that Kris has worked on. If you want to check some of it out, he's a really talented guy and hey, he knows his shit. So you know how I am. I will give anybody the floor in that sense where I feel like I could learn something. And well, I hope that you learned something from this too, whether it's, a new technique to use or just a new way to look at things when you're actually ready to record and go on from there. But other than that, I will see you tomorrow for the live stream, 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And yeah, hope you have a wonderful rest of your day, everybody. Take care, you guys.